You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode of the podcast, we're reviewing the first test between Australia and Pakistan. And Australia have started the test summer off in great style, in dominant fashion, you would have to say. A very crushing victory over Pakistan by 360 runs to lead the series 1-0. David Warner, a lot spoken about David Warner in the lead up to this test match, obviously. His farewell series, obviously announced his plans to retire after the Sydney test against Pakistan. And he scored a very impressive century, 164, to lead Australia in this test match with the bat. Nathan Lyon took his 500th test wicket and joined the greats of Australian test bowlers in Shane Warne and Glenn McGrath, the only three Australian bowlers to do that, to take 500 test wickets, and also the eighth test bowler in test history to do that as well. So plenty of achievements, plenty of good cricket that Australia played in this test match. On the other hand, Pakistan struggled. And it's not a surprise. From ball one of this test match, they struggled immensely with the bat and with the ball. Very behind in the test match. Never looked like coming back into the test match. But they showed some good signs. There were some good signs from the debutants in terms of the bowling stocks, with Shazad and Jamal taking wickets. Their batting showed some promise. They showed some good fight. But unfortunately, in the second innings, they collapsed badly to lose this test match by a very big margin. And they face an uphill battle, 1-0 down in the series, not looking like they could come back and win this series. But you never know. There's still two test matches to go. Anything can happen, as we know, in the game of cricket. So plenty to talk about, plenty to unpack from this first test match between Australia and Pakistan to begin the Australian summer. And plenty to talk about, plenty to discuss. So we're going to get into that in this episode of the podcast today. But first of all, let's have a look at the match summary, how the match panned out in terms of the runs scored and where the match ended up. So let's have a look at the match summary between Australia and Pakistan. First test match from the Perth Stadium. Australia won the toss, no-brainer. They batted first. They scored 487 all out in their first innings. David Warner top scored with 164. And the debutant, Amir Jamal, took 6 wickets for Pakistan. Pakistan, in response, in their first innings, were bowled out for 271. Aman al-Haq top scored with 62, and Nathan Lyon took 3 wickets for Australia. In the second innings, Australia finished on 5 for 233 declared. Usman Khawaja top scored with 90, and Karim Shazad, the debutant, took 3 wickets for Pakistan. Pakistan needed a target of 450 runs to win. Unfortunately, didn't quite go to plan for them. They were bowled out for 89. Shahid Shakil top scored with 24. And Josh Hazlewood and Mitchell Starc took 3 wickets each for Australia. Australia won by 360 runs, and Mitchell Marsh was named the player of the match for his back-to-back 50s, and he also got a wicket as well. So that's the match summary, and that's what happened in this first test between Australia and Pakistan. Now then, what were the key moments and key factors from the first test between Australia and Pakistan? Well, there were plenty of key moments and key factors from this test match that decided the test match in Australia's favour and which really cost Pakistan dearly. David Warner's 164 was key in Australia's first innings, posting 487, which was an imposing total. Australia's bowling to dismiss Pakistan for 271 to claim a first innings lead of 216 runs on the first innings was crucial. The partnerships of 82 for the third wicket between Khawaja and Smith and 126 for the fifth wicket between Khawaja and Mitchell Marsh were the key partnerships for Australia in their second innings to rescue Australia from 2 for 5 to post 5 for 233 declared and set Pakistan 450 runs to win, which saw Pakistan bowled out for 89 and Australia win by 360 runs. And those were the key moments and key factors from the first test between Australia and Pakistan from Perth. Now, let's talk about both teams' performances and talk about how both Australia and Pakistan went about their business with the bat and the ball in this test match, where the game was won and lost, and how did they go in this test match. First of all, let's start with Australia and talk about their performance in the test. And let's start with the batters, shall we? As we always do. Let's talk about Australia's batters and their performance in the first test of this series. Warner, 164 and a duck. Khawaja, 41 and 90. Labuschagne, 16 and 2. Smith, 31 and 45. Head, 40 and 14. Mitchell Marsh, 90 and 63 not out. And Alex Carey, 34. And that's how the Australian batters went about their business in this first test match of the series. Let's talk about the first innings performance. Did very well to post 487, an imposing total on a pitch that was doing a bit on day one. Bit of grass, the ball was moving around a little bit. Australia won the toss, chose to bat first, and really made the most of that decision. David Warner led the way, 164, and well supported by Mitchell Marsh, who made 90. Some key partnerships as well. David Warner and Usman Khawaja's opening partnership of 126 really set the tone. A good partnership of 79 for the third wicket between Warner and Smith. 66 between Warner and Head for the fourth wicket, and a very good partnership between Mitchell Marsh and Carey of 90 for the sixth wicket. Really supported Australia in terms of posting that big total of 487. The second innings performance, going into the second innings, they had a lead of 216 runs on first innings. Australia were slightly in trouble at 2 for 5, and the pitch was up and down. Inconsistent bounce was creeping in. The cracks were opening because of the heat, as they often do in Perth. But key innings from Usman Khawaja, 90, Mitchell Marsh, 63 not out, plus the key partnerships that Australia had in their second innings of 82 for the third wicket between Khawaja and Smith and 126 between Khawaja and Mitchell Marsh, allowed Australia to set Pakistan a very imposing total. A target to win of 450. And also those performances and those key innings and key partnerships, as I mentioned, were very important for Australia to try and set up this test match, and they were able to do it. So that's how Australia went about things across the two innings. Overall, I thought the batting was pretty good from Australia. Very, very dominant. You have a look at the first innings. David Warner scored a very impressive century. Obviously, a lot said about David Warner in this test match in terms of his spot in the team. He shouldn't deserve a send-off in Sydney because he announced his retirement pretty much at the start of this series to finish up in Sydney. But with all that being said, with all the stuff happening with him and Mitchell Johnson, all that stuff, he went out there, scored 164, really set up Australia's innings, really set them up to post a big score. He batted well, as David Warner always does. He always likes to prove people wrong, and he certainly did that, even though he got out for a duck in the second innings. But, he already did his job in the first innings and really contributed to Australia's success. Mitchell Marsh, I thought he had a great test match with the bat. 90 and 63 not out. I think Mitchell Marsh is finally realizing that he belongs in this Australian test team. He's had a wonderful few months, Mitchell Marsh. Back in the test side, scored an Ashes 100 in the recent Ashes series. He's captained Australia in one-day and T20 cricket. He's got that leadership responsibility. He's in a good place with his cricket, and he really batted well in this test match. He struck the ball very well, as he always does. Looked pretty much in good touch and good form. And he's going to have a big summer. He's going to have a big series, certainly against Pakistan, but also against the West Indies. He's in good touch. Mitchell Marsh, I thought he batted really well, really impressed by the way he batted. Steve Smith, Usman Khawaja, Travis Head, Marnus Labuschagne, they had a quiet test match from their standards. Some glimpses of some good touch and good form from Labuschagne and Smith and Head. Unfortunately, weren't able to go on and convert into big scores. Usman Khawaja batted well in the second innings, really held the innings together after Australia were in trouble. 90 off 190. He's had a pretty good couple of years back in the test side, Usman Khawaja, and he's done pretty well. So obviously first test match of the summer, they'll be hoping to get back into the runs, especially for Boxing Day in Sydney. Labuschagne, Smith and Head, they'll be hoping for more runs as the series progresses. But, you know, they had some good contributions. They played their role. Alex Carey in the first inning scored some runs. He kept pretty well in this test match, Carey. Very good. Keeping, didn't drop a catch. So he had a pretty good test. So Australia's batting, things are starting to click. Looked pretty strong, dominated the Pakistan bowling attack, really. The Pakistan bowling attack's quite inexperienced. They dominated pretty much. Pakistan had their moments where they were on top of Australia and put some pressure on. But apart from that, Australia were able to keep the pressure on and really put Pakistan under some pressure. So the batting for Australia, I think they'll be pleased with how the batting went about their business in this test match. And as I said, plenty of runs to be scored in the next two test matches for the batting group, hopefully. So that's the batting side of things. Let's talk about the Australian bowlers and how they went about their business in this test match against Pakistan. A wicket for Head, a wicket for Mitchell Marsh, and 5 wickets for Stark, 3 wickets for Cummins, 5 wickets for Lyon, and 4 wickets for Hazelwood. And that's how the Australian bowlers went about their business in this test match. Let's talk about how they went about things across the two innings with the ball. The first innings did very well. To bowl Pakistan out for 271, to gain a lead of 216 runs on the first innings was pretty crucial. The second innings, I think they saved their best performance for last. It was an outstanding performance in the second innings to bowl Pakistan out for 89 on a pitch that was keeping up and down, inconsistent bounce. The cracks had a bit of an impact as well. The Australian bowlers used the conditions very well, and Pakistan weren't able to cope with that pressure and unfortunately crumbled. So that's how Australia went about across the two innings with the ball. Overall, it was a good bowling performance, as you would expect from Australia. This is a very good bowling attack that they have. Stark, Cummins, Lyon and Hazelwood. Then you've got Mitchell Marsh and Travis Head, who can take some handy wickets and bowl some good overs. Performed very well. They kept the pressure on Pakistan. Pakistan couldn't really get away from Australia in this test match. Even in the first innings, they were scoring at 2 runs and over. But they found it hard to score runs, and that's what this Australian attack does. It always puts pressure on you. As soon as one bowler finishes their spell, you hope a part-timer or a medium pacer comes back on, but then, another bowler comes back, like a Hazelwood or a Cummins or a Stark. There's never a let-up, and that's why this Australian attack has had success over the last few years as a quartet, and they bowled really well. Pat Cummins, yet again, he captained pretty well. He bowled well in both innings. Josh Hazelwood, as you would expect from Josh, had a bit of a unlucky first innings. He only took 1 wicket, but he could have had 2 or 3 with the plays and misses that he had off the Pakistan batters. But he bowled well, especially in the second innings. Nathan Lyon was good in both innings. Obviously, good to see Gaz back. We'll talk about him in a minute. Mitchell Marsh, Travis Head did their roles. They bowled a few overs between them, and got a wicket, which was handy. Mitchell Stark, he was a bit all over the place in the first innings. Mitchell Stark got it wrong. He sprayed the ball around, but as we saw from Mitchell Stark, he went in the nets after the end of the Pakistan first innings, just to work on some technical things with his bowling. That proved to be a very good thing to do, because he was on song in the second innings, took 3 wickets, and really kick-started the Australian innings when he got rid of Abdullah Shafiq. First over, got the first wicket, and really kick-started the batting collapse for Pakistan. So the Australian bowlers, very, very, very good performance. But Nathan Lyon, let's talk about Nathan Lyon, because he's the man of the moment, the man of the hour. 500 test wickets for Nathan Lyon, an incredible achievement. As I mentioned earlier, the 3rd Australian bowler to do that behind Warner McGrath, the 8th bowler in Test cricket history to do that as well. It's a great achievement for Nathan Lyon. And you wouldn't have expected that from Nathan Lyon, someone who, when he started out in 2011, made his debut in Galle in Sri Lanka, got rid of Kumar Sangakkara first ball in Test cricket, got a five-run debut as well. You never thought that Nathan Lyon would take 100 wickets, let alone 500. I suppose it's the same with Shane Warne. No one really expected him to take 500 Test wickets, let alone 700. But as the great players do in every sport, they prove people wrong and they work hard. And that's what Nathan Lyon has done. You know, he's a great guy, Nathan Lyon, very humble, doesn't like to talk about himself. He likes to talk about the team and contributing to success. You could see that when people were asking him questions about this milestone, and, you know, he's proud of it. And I think it's very important to be proud of these moments. It just shows what you can achieve in the game. And for Lyon, he's a very important asset in the Australian bowling attack. They dearly missed him in England in the Ashes. The balance of the bowling attack was all over the place without Nathan Lyon after that calf injury. But for him to come back from that, someone who played 100 consecutive Test matches in a row up until he got injured, just shows the longevity that he has. He's a great person, great role model for anyone aspiring to play cricket for Australia. And just a great achievement. You know, you like to see good things happen to good people, and Nathan Lyon's one of them. He's worked hard. He's not a spin bowler that doesn't have many tricks. He doesn't have a deucer like Murali did. He doesn't have a current ball like Ashwin does. But what he does do is he bowls a very good stock delivery, and that's his off spin. His off spinner. And he's so good at it, just adjusting his flight and his speed as well, the trajectory as well. You know, very crafty bowler, Nathan Lyon, and it's great to see him achieve this milestone. Who knows, for Nathan Lyon, he may take more wickets, definitely go past McGrath, you would think. Maybe get to 600, and who knows, he may go past Warney, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, for him to take the 500 wicket was a great achievement. And obviously the drama and the suspense of the DRS, I suppose that's just the way the modern game is. You could say it took away from the moment a little bit, but obviously without DRS and Australia not reviewing that, he wouldn't have got the 500 wickets. So for Nathan Lyon, a bit of drama there. You know, had to wait a little bit longer to get that milestone, but he finally got it. Great achievement from Nathan Lyon. And the Australian bowling overall was pretty good. They know how to bowl in these conditions in Perth. They bowled much better than Pakistan. Obviously, well experienced. Pakistan inexperienced with their bowling. They just know how to win in these conditions. They know how to bowl well in these conditions in Perth, and that's what they did. And they did that very well. And also Australia's fielding was pretty good. I don't think they dropped a catch in this Test match. I don't think they dropped anything. The ground fielding was good. There was a run out in the second innings. Travis Head's run out of Salman in Pakistan's second innings. So the fielding was good again from Australia, saving those crucial runs and taking the chances, which we'll talk about with Pakistan a bit later, that they didn't do. It's a pretty comprehensive bowling performance from Australia. The second innings was top notch. So overall, good bowling performance from Australia, and overall as a team performance, very good as well. Very dominant, and got the job done, as you would expect from this Australian team, who are playing well as a good unit. Very tight-knit group, they've played a lot of cricket with each other, and that's why they're very successful. That's why they're World Test Championship winners, because of that. So that's Australia. That's their performance in this match. Let's talk about Pakistan, talk about their performance in this first Test match against Australia from Perth. First of all, let's start with the Pakistan batters and their performance. Shafiq, 42-2. Al-Haq, 62-10. Masoon, 30-2. Azam, 21-14. Shakil, 28-24. Ahmed, 3-4. Salman, 28 not out and 5. And Ashraf, 9-5. That's how the Pakistan batters went about their business in this first test against Australia. Well, Pakistan, let's talk about their batting across the 2 innings. Well, the first innings, they were bowled out for 271, conceded a lead of 216 on the first innings, found it tough against the Australian bowlers who didn't really give them much to work with, really. Amar Huq played well for his 62, really anchored the innings. But apart from that, they showed some fight and resistance, some very good partnerships as well that provided that resistance. A good opening partnership between Shafiq and Al-Haq, 74 for the opening stand, really set Pakistan up in their innings. But apart from that, not many partnerships of significant note. And then the Australian bowlers were able to take the wickets, and Pakistan weren't really able to handle that pressure. And none of them really found a way to get through that. The second innings, nothing much to talk about in the second innings. It was an absolute disaster. It was, really. It bowled out for 89, chasing 450 to win. That was never going to happen. And I suppose it's not a new thing, but whenever a side is behind in the test match or behind any game in cricket, and they're chasing a big total in the test match, like 450, Pakistan were pretty much in a hopeless position. You know, they couldn't win the game. They couldn't draw the game. The only result that was going to happen, they were going to lose. And on a pitch that was keeping up and down, the cracks, you know, batters getting hit on the gloves and on the body, on the head. It's never a good place to bat, especially in Perth when that happens. And they found it very difficult. Bowled out for 89. And just couldn't cope with the relentless pressure by the Australian batters. So overall, it was a mixed bag batting performance by Pakistan. They showed some promise. They've got some good players. You know, Shafiq, Masoon, Azam, Shahid Shakil. What a start to his test career. You know, they showed their talent. They showed their skill a little bit in this test match, but they weren't able to go on with it. They weren't able to apply themselves for long periods of time. And that was probably the disappointing thing that Pakistan would have felt in this test match. And the conditions, they struggled immensely in the conditions, and that's to be expected. And something that I picked up on, and I think many people would have picked it up as well, but if you're listening to this episode today of the podcast, you would probably realize, yes, now you say it, it's pretty much reflective of how Pakistan have batted in Australia for the last 20-odd years. Pakistan's second innings, when they were bowled out for 89, it sort of took me back. It reminded me of what happened in 2004-05. That test match where Pakistan played Australia in Perth at the WACA. Now, in that test match, Pakistan were bowled out. Well, let's see. They were chasing 450, in this test match. But back in the test match in 2004-05, they were chasing 564 runs to win. They were bowled out for 72 in that test match. Now, you have a look at this batting performance and you have a look at the scorecards. They're very similar. Pakistan in 2023 bowled out for 89 in 30.2 overs, chasing 450. 2004-05, chasing 564 to win in Perth at the WACA back then at the old ground, bowled out for 72 in 31.3 overs. Very similar batting performances. And obviously people would remember that test match. Obviously Glenn McGrath took 8 wickets for 24 in 16 overs. And that just highlights Pakistan's struggles in Perth, but also in these conditions. And it's not surprised that the 3 lowest totals in test cricket for Pakistan in Australia, as you will see on the screen right now, if you're watching on YouTube, all 3 of them have come in Perth. They were bowled out for 62 in 1981 at the WACA, 72, as I mentioned, in that 2004-05 test match in Perth. And this test match in Perth at the new stadium, bowled out for 89. So it just shows you that they don't do well in these conditions. They struggle. And even that test match, 20-odd years later, cricket has a funny way of... that's one of the things in cricket, I suppose, where if you have 2 teams play at the same venue, but years apart, you will get the same result at the same venue against the same teams, even though it was different players, different eras, the same result will happen. And that's what happened here with Pakistan in this batting performance in the second innings. The similarities between the two test matches, first of all, if you go back and look at the scorecards from this test match and the test match in 2004-05 where Pakistan played Australia, the similarities, the way the test match was set up, the way the test match panned out are very, very similar. And the two test matches, very similar, the same result, the same outcome, just about. And I'm pretty sure most people would have picked up on that as they were watching Pakistan collapse the way they did in the second innings. But I thought that was an interesting thing to pick up on and discuss. So I'm pretty sure people would have realized that, but just something, one of those things in cricket where these things happen and it just highlights the problems that Pakistan have had in these conditions. And it's something that they need to work on. That's why if they're ever going to have success here in Australia, that's something they've got to realize that they need to try and improve on. But yeah, as I said, really, really bad batting performance in the second innings, just really sort of gave up and just sort of knew that the writing was on the wall. As I mentioned before, it's a pretty hopeless position to be in. You can't win, you can't draw, you can only lose. And most teams don't gain anything from that. So a bit of a mixed bag for Pakistan, but they just need to find a way to get through the Australian bowlers. How do they put pressure back on them? How do we get through the tough periods? They showed that. They showed that in the first innings. They showed some application. They showed some resistance. It's just about doing that for long periods of time. And that's something they're going to struggle with in the remainder of the series. When they go to Melbourne, when they go to Sydney, that's something that they've got to do. They've got to do that better. Also, they've got to do the basics well with the bat as well. The running between the wickets was poor. Aman al-Haq especially, he's the biggest culprit. Obviously, runs in the family. His uncle Inzamam al-Haq was the same. Not really good between the wickets. They've got to sharpen up in the basics. Pakistan. They've got to run well between the wickets. They just got to do the 1%ers a bit right, a bit better. And if they can do that, then they can be competitive and they can post some decent scores. If they don't do that, and as we've seen in the second innings here where they were bowled out for 89, I think they're going to have the same problem as the series progresses. So Pakistan's batting overall, they showed some good signs of resistance and fight. Unfortunately, the inconsistency, the lack of application cost them. And definitely not happy with their batting performance. They'll definitely look at the areas to improve on there. That's the batting. Let's talk about the bowling for Pakistan and how it went about their business in this first test against Australia. No wickets for Salman, a wicket for Ashraf, 7 wickets for Jamal, 2 wickets for Afridi, and 5 wickets for Shahzad. That's how the Pakistan bowlers went about their business. Let's talk about their performance across the two innings. The first innings, they didn't really bowl well, conceded 487. They lacked consistency with the ball. But, the debutant, Amir Jamal, took 6 wickets and really led the way with Pakistan with the ball there. He was definitely Pakistan's best bowler in the first innings. Everyone else was a bit disappointing, and Pakistan lacked that consistency. They couldn't build pressure on Australia. The second innings, they started well. In the second innings, they had Australia 2 for 5 early on, under pressure, just like in the first innings, struggled, lacked that consistency with the ball, and Australia were able to build their lead up to 450, and Pakistan pretty much struggled from then on in. So their bowling overall, Pakistan, it was a bit of a mixed bag. Showed some signs of some real testing times for the Australian batters on this sort of pitch in Perth. Pitch was up and down, cracks. It was good at times, the bowling from Pakistan. They showed some promise, but other times they struggled. The lack of consistency, the lack of building pressure, the lack of bowling 6 balls at the same spot. They didn't do that for long periods of time. And yes, the bowling attack, they had 2 debutants in Jamal and Shahzad, who I thought bowled well. They were the 2 best bowlers for Pakistan in this test match, the debutants. It is an inexperienced bowling attack, and it did struggle. Also, they didn't play a frontline spinner. They played Salman, the all-rounder. to strengthen the batting because they thought that was their best chance of, providing some stability to the batting. Well, you could say that probably didn't work out, especially in the second innings. So, for Pakistan, taking 20 wickets is going to be a struggle for them in this series. They only took 15 wickets in this test match. They bowled Australia out in the first innings, which was a good result. The second innings, they only took 5 wickets. Australia were pushing for a declaration, which happened because of the situation of the match. So for Pakistan, this bowling attack, just like it was in 2019-20, do have their challenges, do have their struggles. But we saw some good signs. As I mentioned, Jamal and Shahzad bowled really well. Jamal took 6 wickets. Shahzad, he contributed with a couple of wickets in the first innings and 3 in the second innings. He took the first 3 wickets for Pakistan in the second innings, Shahzad. So that's a good positive sign for Pakistan. The 2 debutants, first test match in Australia, bowled really well. Afridi was disappointing. Not quite at his best in this test match, Shaheen Shah Afridi. Ashraf, he didn't really look threatening. Salman, the part-time spinner, he didn't really look threatening at all. Just there to contain runs and bowl some overs, not really looking to take wickets. And apart from that, Pakistan's bowling struggled in this test match. So I think the real problem for Pakistan is how they're going to build pressure on the Australian batters, how they're going to put 6 balls in the right areas. That consistency, building of pressure, taking wickets, and also taking their chances. We saw a couple of drop catches from Pakistan in this test match. Abdullah Shafiq in the first innings, he dropped Usman Khawaja off a top edge. You saw Shah Masoon dropping Mitchell Marsh at mid-off in the second innings. So Pakistan have to be better in the field. They have to take their chances. They can't afford to give second chances to the Australian batters. Otherwise, they're going to make you pay. And we saw that in this test match. So that's something that they need to try and fix going forward. So there are a lot of challenges for the Pakistan bowlers, but they've got to go back to the basics. They've got to have the ability to bowl 6 balls in the right area, build pressure, take their chances, take wickets. If they can do that, they can cause some problems. But, if they don't do that, I do see them struggling as they did in 2019-20. And the Australian batters would just have a field day with the runs and, just put pressure on them and score runs at will. So definitely a lot of improvement for the Pakistan bowlers going forward, but some positives. Jamal, Shahzad, debutants, really good signs there. Other areas they need to improve on. So that's Pakistan in terms of their bowling, and that's how they performed across the test match with bat and ball. Let's preview the second test, which will be in Melbourne at the MCG for Boxing Day. And let's talk about that and talk about how both teams will approach the test match in Melbourne. Traditional test match in Melbourne, Boxing Day, just after Christmas. Everyone looking forward to it as always. And Australia and Pakistan. Let's have a look at the stats between Australia and Pakistan in Melbourne in test matches. The first test match they played against each other was back in 1964. 10 matches. They've drawn 2. Australia lead the head-to-head. 6 wins to Pakistan's 2. And the last time that Pakistan and Australia met in a test match here in Melbourne was back in 2016-17. And that was the last time Australia and Pakistan played a Boxing Day test. Australia won that test match quite convincingly. They won by an innings and 18 runs. And people would remember that test match. Azhar Ali, who's now retired, made 205 for Pakistan. David Warner made 144. Steve Smith made 165. Usman Khawaja made 97. Mitchell Starc made 84 in Australia's innings. And Pakistan lost that test match. So that's the last time they played a test here at the MCG. Australia winning that test match quite convincingly in the end. It was quite a high-scoring test match in the first innings between the both teams. Pakistan made 9 declared for 443. Australia batted once and made 8 declared for 624. Pakistan were bowled out for 163, chasing Australia's first innings deficit. So it was quite an interesting test match back then in 2016-17. What will it be in 23-24? Only time will tell. So in terms of the potential 11s for both teams, let's talk about that, because both teams will definitely make some changes or some selection calls ahead of this second test in Melbourne. Let's start with Australia in terms of their potential 11. I think Australia will keep the same 11, I think. There's no need to change the 11 for Australia. It's a pretty well-settled side. Everyone's playing well with each other. It's a good unit. It's a strong unit. Whenever you win, that helps. So I think they'll keep the same 11, Australia. So their potential 11 for the second test in Melbourne could be Warner, Kawaja, Labuschagne, Smith, Head, Mitchell Marsh, Carey, Stark, Cummins, Lyon, and Hazelwood. So that's Australia's potential 11. Let's talk about Pakistan. Pakistan have some questions to ask themselves in terms of who do we bring in? Do we change the 11? Would that make any difference in terms of us having success in the series? Could be. That could be an option. But I think for Pakistan, they went into this test match without picking a specialist spinner. They went in with Salman, the part-time spinner, who's an all-rounder, who can bat and also bowl some cheap overs as well in terms of that spin role. Now, they do have some spinners in the side, obviously, which they didn't go with here in Perth. Obviously, they've got the spinner Abrar Ahmed, who was the first choice spinner for Pakistan, obviously got injured before the first test of the series in the Prime Minister's 11 match. So he's definitely Pakistan's frontline spinner, but he's got an injury. Also, Pakistan have got, Sajid Khan and Norman Ali as the spin options. So whether they go back to one of those two for the spin option and have a frontline spinner, or they keep the same 11 in terms of, providing that stability with the batting, having the all-rounders in there. But you do sacrifice wicket-taking opportunities, as I was going to say. So that is something for Pakistan to ponder about. They could keep the same 11, even though they've lost badly here in Perth. And whenever you lose badly, you always tend to change the 11. But, do the options that they have, are they going to be good enough to make some sort of an impact? I don't know. Is this the best possible 11 that they can put out on the park? Because they know they have to strengthen the batting with all-rounders, which they did in this test match, because they know that they've got to have the extra batting because of Australia's bowlers. But they do sacrifice a frontline spinner and a wicket-taking opportunity. But I think they may keep the same 11 because I think they probably feel like this is probably the best combination or the best possible 11 that we can put out on the park. So Pakistan's potential 11 for the second test could be Shafiq, Al-Haq, Masood, Azam, Shakil, Ahmed, Salman, Ashraf, Jamal, Afridi, and Shazad. In terms of who will win this second test here in Melbourne, well, obviously Australia got the momentum. They won convincingly in the first test here in Perth by 360 runs. You would think that Australia should be able to win this second test and wrap up the series. Pakistan find themselves in a situation where they're behind in the series. They're trailing 1-0 down. This loss here in Perth would definitely hit the morale, would definitely knock the belief around a bit. But for Pakistan, it's an opportunity on a big day, which is Boxing Day, big test at the MCG, for all of them. For some of them, it's their first Boxing Day test. Now, there's only 2 members of the squad that have played a Boxing Day test previously. And that was back in 2016-17. Obviously, Babar Azam and Sarfaraz Ahmed are the only 2 Pakistan players in the squad to play a Boxing Day test. And that was back in 2016-17, the last time the teams met here in Melbourne for a test match. Everyone else in that team, it's their first time playing on a big stage of a Boxing Day test. So, it's a good opportunity. Go out there. Show us what you can do with the bat and the ball. Yes, you're not the favourites to win. Yes, you have challenges. You have big challenges to try and beat Australia. But if you can go out there, be competitive, take it to Australia in some sort of capacity, you never know. So it's definitely going to be tough for Pakistan. Australia got the momentum. They're going to be very hard to beat. So that's the preview of the second test of this series between Australia and Pakistan. And my final thoughts to wrap up today's review of the first test between Australia and Pakistan from this first test match here in Perth. Well, a dominant performance by Australia, very comprehensive win in the end, fantastic performances by Warner, Mitchell Marsh, Nathan Lyon taking his 500th wicket. Australia very strong in all departments with bat, ball, and in the field. They've started the test summer very well. They'll be looking to wrap up this series in Melbourne and really continue on that winning momentum as the series progresses. For Pakistan, they'll be disappointed with their performance. They didn't bowl well. They didn't bat well at times, but they showed some good fight and resistance with the bat and with the ball during this test match. Unfortunately, they couldn't do that for long periods of time. But it's going to be very hard for them to bounce back in the series. But a big opportunity awaits in Melbourne, Boxing Day test. As we've mentioned, a couple of their players have only played in the Boxing Day test. That was Babar Azam and Sarfraz Ahmed. But for all of them, it's a big opportunity to play in Melbourne at the MCG Boxing Day test, which is always a big test match on the Australian calendar. Opportunity for them to show what they're made of. Their skills with the bat and with the ball. They've got some talented batters. They've got some talented bowlers. They just need to try and execute those skills and hopefully be competitive. But it is going to be a long way back for them to bounce back in this series. But as we know in cricket, anything could happen across the two test matches. So we'll have to wait and see. Only time will tell. Well, thank you everyone for listening to today's episode of the podcast, our first test review between Australia and Pakistan from Perth. If you're listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this first test between Australia and Pakistan in the comments. We would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.